Welcome back to my YouTube channel. At my birthday dinner, laughter danced between the clinking of glasses and the warm glow of candles. It was one of those nights where everyone pretended everything was fine, just for the photos, just for the guests. But beneath the surface, there was a tension only I could feel. My mother leaned close to my father and whispered, "While everyone's here, tell your son to go change the locks at her apartment." Her words sliced through the air like invisible glass. I froze. My brother, sitting beside me, looked up sharply. "Now?" he asked quietly, confused but obedient. Dad just gave a grim nod. "Yes, now. It needs to be done before midnight." The mood shifted instantly. My friends kept chatting, unaware of the storm brewing at our table. My brother grabbed his jacket, kissed Mom's cheek mechanically, and left. I watched him go, a strange chill crawling up my spine. Whose apartment? Why tonight? An hour passed. The cake sat untouched. Mom forced a smile, chatting about how beautiful the candles looked, how the decorations were perfect. But her fingers kept twitching. Dad avoided her eyes. I could tell something wasn't right. When the door finally opened, my brother stepped in, paler than the white tablecloth, his eyes wide and unfocused. He didn't even take off his shoes. He walked straight to Mom, leaned down and whispered, voice trembling, "Mom, there's someone already inside." The room went silent. You could hear the air leave everyone's lungs. Mom's fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto the floor. "What do you mean?" she whispered back, her voice breaking. My brother just shook his head. I heard the TV on, and her laughter. Mom's face drained of color. I'd never seen her like that. So small, so fragile. She stood slowly, holding onto the edge of the table for balance. Dad tried to steady her, but she brushed him off. "You said you changed the lease. You said she was gone," she hissed under her breath. Then it hit me. The her they were talking about wasn't random. It was my father's old friend, the one Mom had discovered months ago. The affair, the heartbreak that nearly broke our family, wasn't over after all. And now, on my birthday, they were trying to erase her existence by changing her locks. But fate has a way of unmasking secrets. Mom sat down again, her expression shifting from shock to steel. "No more hiding," she said quietly. "We deal with truth tonight." She turned to my father, eyes blazing with clarity. "You can either come clean or watch this family fall apart in front of everyone." Dad's silence was his confession. The candles flickered as if reacting to the sudden crack in the air. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mom smiled, not bitterly, but with a strange peace. "Thank you," she whispered to no one in particular. "Because I finally needed to see it for myself." The night didn't end with cake or singing. It ended with quiet strength. Mom walked out of that dining room lighter than she had in years. My brother followed her, still shaken but proud. And I sat there, realizing that sometimes the ugliest truth can set you free. That night wasn't the celebration I expected, but it was the rebirth our family needed. At my birthday dinner, laughter filled the air like soft music. The scent of roasted garlic and vanilla cake mixed into something comforting, familiar, the smell of home. Everyone had gathered around the long dining table, candles flickering and conversation flowing easily. I smiled, looking at my family, pretending that everything was fine. But beneath that surface calm, something about my mother's stillness bothered me. She smiled at everyone else, but hadn't looked at Dad once. Her fingers tapped against her glass rhythmically, as if keeping time with her thoughts. Then, in the middle of my laughter with a cousin, I caught the whisper. My mom leaned close to Dad and murmured, "While everyone's here, tell your son to go change the locks at her apartment." Her tone was soft but sharp, like the edge of a knife wrapped in silk. The moment froze around me. The clinking of glasses, the laughter, it all faded. I stared at her, my heart suddenly pounding, as if my body recognized something my mind couldn't yet process. Dad stiffened but didn't argue. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flicked toward my brother across the table. "Go now," he said quietly. My brother, confused, hesitated. "Now? During dinner?" he asked, looking between them. Mom didn't even look at him when she said, "Yes, before it's too late." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying a fear she was trying hard to hide. No one else seemed to notice the exchange, at least not fully. My aunt was still laughing at a story. Someone poured more wine. The sound of a lighter sparked as someone relit a candle. But I saw everything. The way Mom's shoulders shook slightly, the way Dad avoided everyone's gaze, and the way my brother's face turned serious before he stood up. He grabbed his jacket, nodded silently, and walked out the door. The front door closed with a quiet click, and the air in the room changed. Mom sat still, staring into her plate as though it could swallow her whole. Dad cleared his throat, muttering something about the food being excellent, but his voice cracked mid-sentence. I looked from one to the other, my chest tightening. Whose apartment? Why tonight? And why did Mom's eyes look like she was about to break? Minutes stretched into an hour. The laughter around me turned hollow, distant. My slice of cake melted untouched on the plate. And though no one else seemed to realize it, I knew. Something far deeper than a lock was about to change that night. Mom's order lingered in the air long after my brother left, like smoke that refused to fade. I tried to shake off the uneasiness, to keep smiling, but my thoughts kept circling back to her words, "Change the locks at her apartment." The sentence echoed in my head, strange and heavy. Mom was usually calm, composed even in chaos, but the way she said it, there was fear in her tone. A kind of quiet desperation that didn't belong at a birthday table. Dad shifted in his seat, forcing a small laugh when my uncle cracked a joke. It didn't land. He poured himself another glass of wine, staring at the bubbles rising in it instead of looking at Mom. Every few seconds, his knee bounced under the table. It was subtle, but I caught it. He wasn't just tense, he was terrified. Mom, on the other hand, had gone completely silent. She kept running her napkin through her fingers, folding and unfolding it, her eyes glassy as though she was somewhere else entirely. I glanced at the clock. 20 minutes. My brother still hadn't returned. My heart started to race even though I didn't know why. The dinner carried on around us, small talk, polite laughter, but it felt like a play now, everyone acting out their roles while something dark hummed beneath the surface. Finally, I leaned toward Mom. "Whose apartment?" I asked softly. Her head snapped toward me, eyes sharp and wet at once. "Eat your cake," she whispered, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That's when I knew something was wrong. Seriously wrong. Dad tried to distract me, asking about work, about the new project I'd started, but I barely heard him. Every creak from the hallway, every car passing outside made Mom flinch. She kept checking her phone, turning it face down each time, as if afraid of what message might appear. Half an hour turned into 40 minutes. The candles on the cake had burned low, their wax dripping like slow tears onto the frosting. The mood had collapsed, though everyone was pretending not to notice. My brother was never gone this long for anything simple. I could see the tension building in Dad's jaw, the guilt shadowing his eyes. When the front door finally opened, all conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks clattered. Everyone turned. My brother stepped in, but one look at his face told me, whatever he'd seen had changed something. He was pale, shaken, and unable to speak at first. The entire room froze, waiting for him to say something. He swallowed hard, his gaze darting from Dad to Mom. Then he whispered, almost brokenly, "Mom, there." The words died on his tongue, but the look in his eyes said enough. And in that moment, before he could even finish his sentence, I realized that this night, my birthday night, was never about celebration. It was about the truth that refused to stay locked away any longer. My brother stood there in the doorway, his breath uneven, his skin pale as paper. The chatter at the table died instantly. Even the background music, light and cheerful minutes ago, now sounded strange, almost mocking. He looked like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. His eyes flicked to Mom, then to Dad, before dropping to the floor as if the weight of what he carried was too heavy to say aloud. Mom pushed her chair back slowly. The legs of the chair scraped against the floor, slicing through the silence. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound calm. My brother swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing hard. "Mom," he said, barely above a whisper, "there's someone already there." The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Dad's glass stopped midair, his hand frozen. Mom blinked, as though trying to process what she'd just heard. "What do you mean?" she demanded, standing now. "What do you mean, someone?" My brother rubbed the back of his neck, his voice shaking. The lights were on, the door was unlocked. I thought maybe the landlord was there or something, but then I heard the TV playing, and a woman's laughter. His voice cracked at the last word. I called out, but no one answered, and when I stepped inside, there were clothes, hers, scattered around. Like she'd never left. The blood drained from Mom's face. Her hand clutched the edge of the table as though she needed it to stay upright. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That can't be." Dad tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened, then closed again. The silence between them screamed louder than any argument ever could. My chest tightened as I realized what this was about. This wasn't about changing locks for safety. This was about erasing someone. Mom turned to Dad, her voice brittle. "You told me you ended it. You said she was gone." Her words trembled, raw and exposed. Dad's eyes darted to mine, then away, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The candles flickered violently as if stirred by an unseen wind. The room felt smaller now, suffocating. My brother dropped into his chair, shaking his head. "I shouldn't have gone," he muttered under his breath. Mom's breathing grew shallow. "She's still living there, isn't she?" she asked, each word like a blade. Dad didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written all over his face. For a long time, no one spoke. The sounds of cutlery and laughter that had once filled the air were gone, replaced by the thick, unbearable weight of realization. The secret that my parents had buried for months had clawed its way back to the surface, on the very night meant to celebrate life, love, and family. Mom finally sank back into her seat, staring blankly at the half-melted candles on my cake. "So that's what you wanted to hide," she said quietly, almost to herself. Her voice was steady now, eerily calm. "All this time, pretending we were fine, pretending she was gone, no one dared to move. The only sound was the soft tick of the clock on the wall, a cruel reminder that the moment couldn't be undone." My brother sat still, pale and shaken. And I realized that what he'd found wasn't just a woman in an apartment. It was the truth none of us were ready to face. Mom didn't cry, not right away. She just sat there, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly against the tablecloth. Her silence was more terrifying than if she'd screamed. Dad tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled it away sharply, her chair scraping as she stood. The birthday candles flickered, their light catching the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes that hadn't yet fallen. "Who was there exactly?" she asked my brother again, though I think she already knew the answer. My brother's voice came out weak, almost apologetic. "It was her, Mom, the same woman. She was sitting on the couch, wearing one of Dad's old shirts. She didn't even flinch when I opened the door, just looked up and said, 'Tell him I'm not leaving.'" The words hit like a hammer. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, but she didn't speak. Dad stood, his chair tipping back slightly. "Enough," he said, his voice suddenly loud, commanding. "We'll talk about this later." But the authority he was trying to summon wasn't there anymore. His words fell flat, stripped of power. Mom turned toward him slowly, her expression hardening into something unrecognizable. "Later?" she repeated, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You wanted to send our son to change the locks on your mistake, on your lie, and you think this can wait until later?" The whole table had gone still. My cousins, my aunts, everyone sat frozen, unable to look away. This wasn't a family dinner anymore. It was the unraveling of everything we thought we knew. Dad's lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. The silence that followed was louder than any shouting match. Finally, Mom let out a shaky breath. "You promised me it was over," she said, softer this time. "You looked me in the eyes and told me she was gone." She reached for her glass, her fingers unsteady, then set it down untouched. I wanted to believe you. I really did. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Not anger, not defensiveness, but actual fear. He looked at her like a man watching something precious slip through his hands. It's complicated, he muttered, but even he seemed to know how hollow that sounded. Mom laughed, a sound so bitter it hurt to hear. Complicated? She repeated. You've been living a lie under the same roof as me, and you call it complicated? You used our son to cover your mess. You thought I'd never find out? She took a step back, shaking her head slowly. Well, happy birthday to me too, I guess. No one moved. No one breathed. My brother stared down at his hands, his knuckles white. I felt my own throat tighten, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Everything, the laughter, the warmth, the sense of family, had vanished, leaving only the raw truth behind. Mom turned to me briefly, her eyes softening just enough to whisper, I'm sorry this happened tonight. Then she looked back at Dad, her voice steady now, full of finality. But I'm done pretending. And with that, she walked away from the table, leaving behind the flickering candles, the untouched cake, and a silence that swallowed the entire room. The room stayed silent long after Mom walked out. The sound of her heels faded down the hallway, but the echo of her words lingered like smoke no one could clear. Dad sank back into his chair, his face drained of color, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping him from falling apart. My brother sat motionless, staring blankly at his untouched plate. No one dared to move or speak. The cheerful warmth that had filled the house only an hour ago was gone, replaced by a cold, unbearable stillness. The candles on my cake burned low, wax pooling into messy rivers. I watched them melt, thinking about how quickly something beautiful could turn ugly, how a single whisper could shatter years of careful pretending. I didn't know whether to feel anger or pity. I looked at my father, the man who had always seemed invincible, so composed, so certain, and all I saw was someone small, frightened, and defeated. He rubbed his temples and whispered, I didn't want it to come out like this. His voice broke halfway through. My brother looked up, eyes red. You shouldn't have involved me, he said quietly. You used me, Dad. I thought I was helping Mom. I didn't know I was helping you hide something. Dad opened his mouth but didn't argue. He just nodded, staring into the half-empty wine glass in front of him. The weight of his choices sat heavy in the air. For years, I'd seen cracks between my parents, unspoken tension, silent dinners, forced smiles, but I never imagined the break would be this loud, this public, this final. When Mom's car started outside, I could see her through the window for a brief moment, her face calm, her expression unreadable. She wasn't running away. She was reclaiming something. Her dignity, her peace, maybe even her freedom. She drove off slowly, not looking back once. The sound of the engine fading felt like an ending. I glanced at my brother, who was still pale, still trembling. What did you see when you got there? I asked gently. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. I saw the truth, he said simply. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. We sat there for a long time, 3 people who shared a last name but no longer shared the same sense of home. The balloons above the table drifted weakly in the air. The decorations suddenly looked childish, mocking. It struck me how birthdays were supposed to mark beginnings, new chapters. Yet this one had ended something instead. Dad finally stood and walked toward the window, watching the empty driveway. I never meant to hurt her, he said, barely audible. But his words didn't carry far. They didn't matter anymore. Mom had already decided that the truth was better than a lifetime of pretending. As the candles sputtered out one by one, I realized this night would stay etched in my memory, not as the birthday where I blew out candles, but the one where my family finally stopped hiding behind them. The night ended not with celebration, but with quiet reckoning. The laughter that once filled the house was replaced by the sound of truth settling into every corner, uninvited, but necessary. Mom didn't return that night, and none of us spoke about it again, not because it didn't matter, but because we all knew something sacred had broken. In the days that followed, there were tears, confessions, and long silences that said more than words ever could. Mom filed for separation soon after, and though it hurt, there was something profoundly brave about the way she did it. She wasn't running away, she was walking toward peace, Dad tried to make amends, but some things, once shattered, can only be rebuilt from a distance. As for my brother and me, we grew closer, bound by the weight of what we'd witnessed. We both learned that truth doesn't destroy, it reveals. And sometimes revelation is the only way to begin again. Months later, when my next birthday came, I didn't plan a big dinner. I invited just Mom and my brother. We sat quietly, candles flickering between us, the air gentle, unforced. No whispers, no lies. Just honesty, and the strange kind of love that survives the storm. That night, as I blew out the candles, I didn't wish for happiness. I wished for truth, and for the strength to face whatever it brings. Because that birthday, the one where everything fell apart, was also the one where life finally began again.